Hey everyone, and welcome to the first ever episode of SHADYVISION. I'm your host, Matt Shady, and with this show, we aim to bring you a different take on current events through the lens of philosophy, spirituality, and art. For our first topic, why did CV-19 happen? Who or what or who caused it? What behind-the-scenes power players could be taking advantage, and what's their plan? And most of all, what new changing world is going to emerge out of this? And what role do we, the individuals, have to play in it? Though it certainly has been terrible, I believe that the CV-19 crisis of 2020 and the changes that it could bring will ultimately be a net positive for humanity. The CV-19 crisis presents a critical crossroads for humanity on the macro-historical timeline. When we look back at this time, it will be seen as the point at which everything changed. But what is exactly going on here? To understand, we have to first figure out why this crisis happened. In this episode, I'll present the argument that this was the inevitable outcome of our society itself and our society's relationship with nature. But deeper than society, the operating system that society runs on, civilization, and in turn, civilization's relationship with nature. In fact, the true culprit behind CV-19 is civilization itself. Ultimately, CV-19 was the unavoidable outcome of a collision course civilization has been on since the beginning. Nature wants us to remember that there are other models that served us better and for longer. But for only 5,000 years, about 1 to 3% of all human existence on Earth, we've been walking ever closer to the end of a rapidly shortening plank. This year, nature did the unthinkable. It put a pause on the unstoppable force of civilization. And it's given civilization itself a chance to do something it hasn't been able to since its origin in the Fertile Crescent, to stop and think for a second. Is this really the right way? With CV-19, nature sent us to our rooms to think about what we've done. People have a lot of interesting conspiracy theories about CV-19, don't they? But isn't it more likely that CV-19 came from the place that most viruses come from biological interactions in the biosphere? I mean, viruses are a thing. Today, right now, there are estimated to be at least 320,000 viruses infecting the mammalian kingdom alone. One of those was CV-19, most likely just harmlessly sitting in an isolated animal somewhere in the wild, where it would have stayed if not for the wet market, which was likely the site of the first superspreader event. These wet markets represent a sort of petri dish where all sorts of biological material from different ecosystems which don't regularly interact with each other are mashed up against one another. A perfect place for a virus to cross multiple species barriers, eventually making its way to humans. This isn't the first time that animal cruelty has led to the spread, creation, or mutation of a deadly virus. Bovine spongiform encephalopathy, or mad cow, swine flu, SARS, avian influenza, and even HIV are all agreed to have most likely originated, mutated, or jumped the human species barrier from conditions in which livestock were treated inhumanely or otherwise unnaturally. And it's not only animal cruelty causing these outbreaks. Our clustering of social organization into civilization itself, packing as many of us as closely together as possible, has caused an abundance of diseases to erupt, spread rapidly, and plague the human race. from the Black Plague to the Spanish flu. It's also been shown that the reduction in overall biodiversity caused by deforestation has had a direct correlation with increased occurrence and spread of disease. Since more diverse host communities commonly inhibit the spread of parasites, diseases, and viruses. Is it somehow surprising to learn that the entire biosphere is in fact an ecosystem, a finely balanced system just like any of the other ones we humans have created, only vastly more complex? Like any system, it has fail-safes and safeguards, and is capable of working mostly properly under even the most extreme duress. But pushed and punished to a certain point, it will start to break down. And up to this point, the progress of civilization, with its #1 priority of growth at all costs, with no thought to sustainability, has all but pushed the natural balance beyond its absolute breaking point. Looking at the big picture, it's plain to see a direct correlation between the advancement of civilization and the rise of new and deadly diseases and viruses that have plagued humanity throughout history. So, do we even need nature? Can't our advanced civilization take care of us enough? Civilization may be an awesome system, but it is in fact a subsystem. It's built on top of nature. Civilization depends on inputs from nature to create its own outputs from. Want to make food? Civilization needs plants and animals. Needs somewhere to live? Civilization needs land that isn't currently on fire or underwater. Sure, we could theoretically use civilization to replace all of this, but we are still many, many years away from that. And the breaking point is happening now. Civilization is dependent on nature. Therefore, it needs functioning nature for itself to function properly. People should know this, right? But knowing this runs contrary to the narrative of progress at all costs that civilization runs so dependently on. So we have media, consumerism, capitalism, religion, drugs, and alcohol, all to keep our higher brain functions nicely sedated while civilization does its thing with us. And that's nothing to speak of the mental, emotional, and psychological effects of being cut off from nature. More on that later. Nature is a finely balanced system. The question is, how far can we push this system before it pushes back in an effort to rebalance itself? Like every system with fail-safes and safeguards, it's likely to do something to protect itself from catastrophic failure. Our own bodies communicate to us that they need change when they're subjected to unhealthy behavior, with maladies starting from the benign but increasing in severity. So too has the biosphere been reacting to the repeated abuses it's been subjected to over the course of civilization. The problem with civilization is that it's a completely taker-based model. Because its main focus is progress at all costs, it will take anything and everything it needs to achieve its goals, with absolutely no thought to the long-term sustainability of those resources, eventually causing mass ecological imbalances that take their toll on the broader system, creating cascading consequences for the entire biosphere. From the Black Plague to entire countries on fire, nature has been sending us messages we've been repeatedly ignoring no matter the severity. So, before we entirely shit the bed, nature in its infinite conscious wisdom put us on pause by leaving a failsafe which we triggered through our own cruelty and ignorance. Releasing and spreading a serious but relatively non-lethal virus that is, however, so incredibly contagious that it was able, via our globalized culture, to spread to every corner of our civilization within a matter of weeks. The only way to stop it? By putting everything on pause for a moment so that we could stop and think about what we've been doing for the last 5,000 years. In other words, nature's called a timeout on civilization and has sent us to our rooms to think about what we've done and birth a new kind of civilization. But we've only known this way for so long. Where will we look to for inspiration to build this new way of life? Civilization has brainwashed us into thinking that it's the only way, because it's in its own best interest. But is it the only way? Civilization has actually only existed for about 5,000 years. About 1 to 3% of human existence. What were we doing for the other 97 to 99%? And how many cataclysms did we cause, plagues did we suffer, or ice caps did we melt during that time? Well, none, because we were in balance with nature, and much happier for it. The organizational model we were in during that time is commonly known as tribalism, but this loaded and politicized term does it a disservice. For it is truly and simply the preferred organization by which the human species lives and thrives best, just as how wolves organize into packs, fish in schools, birds into flocks. Humans, since their origins, have organized into tribes. Over 200,000 to 300,000 years, we evolved while living this way, and became socially, culturally, and psychologically optimized for it. As opposed to the many shallow connections offered by mass civilization, in tribalism, we had fewer but much closer relationships with our family and community, relationships that filled our days with meaning and love. Working alongside our lifelong friends and family rather than in anonymous cubicle farms with strangers. We were taught and guided by cherished loved ones and elders rather than impersonal and overburdened institutions. Every person was equal, and it was not necessary to build the comforts of the few on the back-breaking labor of the many, for each and every person had enough as a result of this organizational model's balance with nature. Just as every other animal on Earth has had enough to live and thrive for hundreds of thousands of years. An organization where, importantly, we actually had to work less, not more, than we do today to sustain our community. Truly, this was the time alluded to in myth and legend as the Garden of Eden before the fall. This is the true home we've been missing for over 5,000 years.
We are wired for the full experience and encounter that our deep time ancestors had, which was namely tribal or village life on a consistent basis, participation with nature on a consistent basis, rituals to deal with the movement and transitions of life. So we feel kind of an aching echo in our bodies of what it is that we don't even know to name, but is not there.
Most importantly and fundamentally though, this was a socio-cultural organization based on leaving more than it takes from the ecosystem that it's dependent upon, making sure that there was always enough left in the land for generations upon generations to come. This is the way of life that our souls have been aching for the past few millennia, while civilization did its best to make us forget. But now, through the sudden abstinence of a lot of civilization's distractions brought on by this crisis and chill, we seem to be starting to remember. Nature has allowed us to remember. During 2020, we stayed at home with only our closest family and friends, and nature once again became our #1 pastime, suddenly returning us to the kind of life we lived 5,000 years ago in a great many ways. This catalytic event also coincided with many other changes that had been slowly underway, accelerating them rapidly. Over the course of 2020, we saw more changes on the global and macro level in 1 year than in any in human history. A lot of these changes were spearheaded by the behind-the-scenes power players, as they saw an opportunity to execute the plans they had been laying for decades, pretty much in broad daylight. Using the inflationary dollar as a tool to bring assets with actual value under their control. Many of these plans were positive though, such as the green energy and electric vehicle revolution. While the 1% hatched their plan for the Great Reset, each and every one of us experienced a reset ourselves on some level. People finally had a break from their infinite daily loop to think about their life, their place in society, and whether they wanted to keep going in the same direction. Even bigger changes were spurred on by the independent grassroots movements of the world. The blip in the cultural torrent allowing them the chance to emerge and shine. The massive shutdown of the entertainment industry created an unprecedented need for independent creator-based content. We even saw major media and stars being forced to lower their production levels to those of the independent creators, thus legitimizing this style of content towards the masses in heretofore unprecedented ways. This more egalitarian distribution of cultural control has allowed the phenomena of digital tribes to be able to flourish more than ever, as more independent voices create connections for even the most marginalized pockets of society, urging a huge and unprecedented move towards equality. And this year, helped in no small way by this democratization of cultural control, the human tribe banded together to see the flourishing of social movements such as Black Lives Matter, accomplishing leaps and bounds towards correcting millennia of marginalization and social stratification that civilization has built itself up and thrived upon. Just as the 1% attempted to launch their complete and final takeover of currency, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency gained more traction than ever, and with it, the movement to create a decentralized system of finance, one that is no longer controlled explicitly by the powerful few, but instead by a tribe, if you will, of dedicated hackers, tech heads, and financial wizards, devoted to redistributing control of the financial systems of the world back to the people. And the recent Reddit revolution of Wall Street, where a digital tribe of Redditors, in the culmination of a movement that started with them having a little bit extra time during 2020, banded together to crush a number of market manipulating hedge fund behemoths, a victory marking a fundamental shift in power for the little guy that could change Wall Street forever. Many of the changes were organic. There was the work from home revolution, allowing us more time with our family, the test run of universal basic income, with urgently needed stimulus finally pushing governments to see the potential economic benefits of redistributing some of the wealth generated by the hard-working masses back to them for a change. In this way, in all areas of society, on every level from the institutional to the grassroots to the single individual, everyone banded together in 2020 to help raise the vibrational level of the world in general. And the world is in an exponentially better position than it was just a year ago. Many of these changes brought us back towards the tribal roots that we have been missing and destroying for millennia, as we began to realize en masse that the only way out of the mess of our recent ancestors is found by reclaiming the lost values of our deep-time tribal ancestors. Values such as humanism, freedom, family, and respect and love of nature. And using these values to build a better world, not just for the few, but for all people, plants, and animals, to thrive in the shared abundance of this beautiful planet we call home. There's still an incredible amount of work left to be done, but finally, it seems that we may be on the right track. Amazingly, nature's message may have had the intended effect. This was the year we hit critical mass and finally started to truly move into the future. 2020 saw one of the greatest truly global trials that many of us have seen in our lifetimes. A time when our overriding and assumedly infallible system of globalized civilization was truly put to the test. But from the dumpster fire that was our society in early 2020, we have risen like a phoenix from the ashes. And over the course of the year, we saw multiple facets of society returning to the deeply human values of their ancestors in one of the most transformative single years in human history. So now I put it to you, be a part of the metamorphosis. Take advantage of the chaos and flux and make some of the changes in your life that you've been wanting to. Massive change is happening all around us, and the energy is in the air. Use some of that to start being a little less who they tell you to be and a little more who you want to be and who you really are. Little by little and all together, we'll start to make this planet the way we know in our soul that it ought to be. So what did 2020 mean to you? And what changes in society and in your own life did you notice because of it? Were they all negative, or were there some positive ones too? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this, please consider liking and subscribing. It really helps a lot. And everyone who likes, subscribes, and comments will be automatically entered to win a copy of Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. This was in fact the book that inspired this video and changed my life, really. If you want to support the show even further, you can buy one right now via the link below, or why not pick up some of my art on the blockchain via the link below in the description. Thank you all so much for watching, so tune in next time for more Shady Vision.